Just close your eyes and do it. What's the worst that can happen?
I wasn't sort of posh schoolboy enough to be like in the meetings and being very like, and I just can't do this. It killing
impacts
me.
people. Some people turn around and will try and pull me, to the side and be like, are you sure you want to be smiling so much and being so nice? And I'm like, it's not me who's the problem.
It's here, the first episode of Women Are Good Business, the podcast. And we are with Hannah Bernard from Nationwide Building Society and the co-chair of the Investing Women Taskforce, and Karen Rudich, who is the co-founder of Sherloc, trying to change the world for small businesses. And we had the honour, thank you Hannah, of recording this in Nationwide's podcast studio. So join us on the journey of Women Are Good Business, the podcast. And if you enjoy it, please do like, follow and subscribe. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the inaugural episode of Women Are Good Business, the podcast. So I'm very excited to have you both with us today and to share your stories, your journey, a little bit about the Investing Women Task Force, and just about why backing women is really good for business and for the UK economy. So, but we're going to start with, we're going to get personal straight away. So we're going to start with just understanding your personal journeys. And I want you to take me back to the beginning and kind of what is the story of how you got here, and what were the moments that kind of made you realise that maybe it was a little bit harder because you were a woman? And Hannah, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay. I think I started very naively thinking that everything was fine. I remember actually in my 20s going, there is no glass ceiling. Bless you not. So I joined, I did a graduate scheme. I did it with Sainsbury's. I was a management accountant. I did my training. I worked in finance for Sainsbury's supermarkets for best part of a decade. Then I was finance director for Sainsbury's Bank. So I moved to Edinburgh on a 2-year secondment, stayed there for 7. And I think it was the moment when I was in the bank that I suddenly was like, actually, there's a few things here. I was finance director, I sat on the board, but I remember there was one moment that kind of, when I was thinking about this, that kind of stuck in my mind, where I went to see a supplier of one of the products that we sold. And in fact, he came to see us in an office. And as I went out to greet him, he thought I was the receptionist and tried to give me his coat. And I remember the time going, well, that was awkward. And I suppose it's about what people, the preconceptions of people. And I think it's at moments like that where you go, and I found myself, I'd kind of serve the tea, and I remember someone saying to me, don't do that. And I'm like, I'm just trying to make people feel at home and they get in being hospitable. And so there's things like that where I did it. And so you kind of go, is that, like, what impact does that have? And I think actually, I don't think, there'll be moments where you go, well, would I have got that job if I'd been a man? I don't know that that's the case. I think it's more that I think on occasion, maybe it's to my advantage that people underestimate you. And then you surprise them and stuff happens and you think, well, it was your fault for something. And I guess one of the feedback I did have, someone said to me was, oh, you're like a steel fist in a velvet glove, was the feedback from one of my managers once. And I think it's because I can't help but be very smiley. And so I think, and so people kind of go, oh, that, so she must be really nice. And I'm like, I try and be nice.
Yes, I am nice.
But on occasion, I can be quite hard. And I suppose it's just about, so I don't know if it's had any impact on my career. I would say that you have to be comfortable with being the way you are and resisting the temptation to not be smiley and to not, because that's what I like, being kind of warm and friendly and then people just have to accept that you can still get on by being friendly and smiley and things like that.
Absolutely. And I think, like you, a number of times someone's assumed, instead of being the boss, that I was the receptionist or the tea lady. Happens so many times, a lot of the time because my name's Sam, and so people used to assume I was a bloke, so they turn up to a meeting expecting a guy like me, and as both you ladies know, frequently my hair is not this colour, it's bright pink, which also throws them. I kind of secretly relished in it once I got a little bit older. But Karen, tell us about your journey a little bit as well, and kind of, were there any moments that you had and you're like, oh, actually it's a little bit different being a woman in this environment?
Yeah, Yeah, a little bit like Hannah. It was very much, I never thought there was a glass ceiling and nothing was going to stop me. I ended up in banking by accident after I came to the UK, helped to set up a .com. We listed on AIM. It was really smooth sailing. I mean, fundraising today was, it's so hard compared to back in the day. And then, when the economy started to tank, I rolled up and rocked up on the trading floor, and investment banking, absolutely loved it. Investment banking is very much around the numbers. So to me, I'm all around the numbers, didn't really see a difference until I went into wealth management or private banking. And I remember I was restructuring. It was for Barclays Wealth, and I turned up to their Mayfair office, and very old school with the beautiful, traditional curtains and the long oak table. And I was there and, serving myself a cup of tea, and the gentleman started to walk in, and they're like, "Oh, love, will you give me a cup of tea?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." I'm like, who else wants one, right? Because manners, it doesn't hurt to have manners. And then I remember I served everyone, took the saran wrap off the cookies, put them in the middle, and then went and sat down at the head of the table. And I sat down and I was just waiting. I love to observe people. So somebody turned around, they were like, "I think you're in the wrong room." And I was like, actually, I was waiting for someone to say something. "Thank you so much." I'm like, "I'm actually here from head office. And gentlemen, you've not been performing." So I opened up my books and I'm like, "Please look at your packs in front of you." And to me, it was like, I don't have to change myself, but clearly the environment I'm in has different expectations. But I've kind of chosen to turn that into a strength. I'm not going to change the fact that I'm smiley, I'm bubbly. It impacts people. Some people turn around and will try and pull me, to the side and be like, "Are you sure you want to be smiling so much and being so nice?" And I'm like, it's not me who's the problem. If they want to underestimate me, then please, by all means, go ahead at your own peril. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was my first, my first time when I noticed that it was a little bit different for women. I chose not to let that affect me. I've chosen my entire career to push back when people have pulled me to the side and tried to give me, unnecessary advice that maybe might be well-meaning. I've pushed back and I've said, this is not how role models behave. So thank you for your advice, but perhaps you need to be changing yours. I do see that as a bit of a generational thing. I don't find that anymore. But maybe it's also because I've gotten older and I don't look as young as I used to. Yes. I think really when it was eye-opening was when I came out of banking and I had my second company, which was a consulting firm. And we used to get asked to go and bid against the top 4 inside of the boardrooms of the banks. They were my clients. And I remember walking in one day, doing a pitch, coming back out, waiting in the waiting room with the usual suspects who were all gentlemen with, different colored ties. And there was me in a bright color dress. And I knew I had that room. When you're looking and you're putting together a business case and a pitch, when you've hooked your client. And they came out and they were like, "We're really sorry, we're going to go with so-and-so." And I remember sitting there and one of my mentors was in the board, and I pulled him to the side and I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "The problem is not you. The problem is that, it's more comfortable sometimes to pick others that look like you. And unfortunately, you look nothing like them." And it's it comes from a place of fear. And this is exactly why we asked you to come in, because we're trying to change that. So it was a bit of a bitter pill because, you've got allies and people trying to change it. But then I just kind of stepped back and I was like, oh, if I want to move my business from 2.5 million turnover, which it was at the time, to 10, I need to either fit within the mold so I can then change it from the inside or keep butting my head against it in the hopes that, you will change it. So for that particular one, since it was in the millions, I ended up going for the first option, which was let's get somebody in that will, close those deals and then change it.
Yeah, and I think it's changing the structure from within, whilst also I'm a great believer in doing that and also creating some FOMO out here and just being awesome. Yeah, because I think if you do both, then you get really big change. And And it's really interesting that you found it a little bit in finance and then also running your own business, except you're probably still working within that same similar sort of arena. And I think it is that what comes through for both of you is you were unwilling to change who you are. And I think that's so important. And also what's come through is we need more diversity across seniority and business and institutions, because then you're less likely to get that, you don't look like us, we're not going to deal with you because it's different.
You need the encouragement to say, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah,
kind of thing. So
absolutely.
I remember when I first joined a financial organisation, let's not get personal. And I remember I'd been there probably 6 months, and I felt like I wasn't sort of posh schoolboy enough to be like in the meetings and being very like, and I just can't do this. It's killing me, and I couldn't feel at all comfortable doing the way that they were performing in those meetings. And I went to see my boss. I said, I just don't know if this is going to work, because I just don't feel like it's playing to my strength, and it's not, I just can't do it. And she was like, this is exactly why we hired you. We hired you for diversity and difference. So just like stick with what you're doing. You'll kind of go through that uncomfortable bit of it, and she was right. I kind of stayed, but at the time I was just like, this is just, I felt like I was not able to conform, and I was like, this is just organ donor rejection.
Yeah, or like you've got the bullseye on your back, right? Because you've been hired to change the organization. There is that expectation as well that you come into a leadership role, and you still need to have your steel coat every morning, put it on when you go in, because change is hard, right? And when you're on your lonesome, sometimes it can be quite difficult.
Yeah. And Hannah, I think understanding that and that the kind of support and mentors that you have is really interesting, because I think you're right. I think we all need someone, and I think we're really good as women at creating a bit of a tribe and supporting each other, but also having allies supporting and saying, look, it's not you, I think is really helpful. And bosses who really have recruited you to grow, I think, as well. And I've been lucky enough to have that in my career. I always say, don't ever take a job you know how to do, because it'd be really boring. I always go and do something that's new and a little bit scary. Maybe not as scary as some of the stuff I've decided to go off and do, but hey ho. But Hannah, coming to you now, what some of the listeners will know, but not all of them, is alongside your big role at Nationwide, you also are the co-chair of the Investing Women Taskforce. So you're now in a real kind of position of institutional power to make change around the kind of gender discussion, especially around women in business that we're talking about today. So can you tell us a little bit about that, but also kind of, does that feel strange, or did it feel slightly inevitable?
No, it just feels strange. So hold on. I suppose it's, how stuff happens. It's like, it's just like things fall into place, and you're like, actually, it's just right place, right time, lucky me kind of thing. So I think the fact that I'm doing the task thing is amazing. And it's amazing to have Debbie Goscoe's the other co-chair, who's, she's just so different to me. And we just make it's kind of like a really nice kind of sort of marriage that kind of brings together the best of both, I think. But so I think it's been amazing to do that. It does put an onus on, like, what are we going to do then, and how do we keep the conversation alive, and we've got to keep pushing, and it feels on it's like a roller coaster. Sometimes it feels like you're making progress, and other times it's like it's just really, really difficult. So I think but I've always been a feminist. I've got 2 daughters. I've always felt passionately about making sure that women can grow up and do whatever the hell they want, and achieve their potential, and nothing should get in its way, and all the rest of it. And so it's just nice to get here, and it's nice to then be able to keep plugging away and to kind of keep annoying people, which is generally what we do all the time.
Can I just challenge you on one point? Right place at the right time? I don't think so. You earned that.
No, let me.
You were assigned, or it was requested that you join and lead the task force because of who you are and how you've done in your career, right?
Well, except that. Do I want to do this? There weren't many women running business banks, so it was a bit right place, right time. But I'm delighted, and I'm glad I was there, and I'm glad the organisations, Barclays was there to support me and put loads of stuff behind it. And we had a fantastic team. And I think, so there was a bit of serendipity about it. But thank you.
Come on. Yeah, we might be a tribe that supports each other, but also a tribe that has no problem telling each other what is going on. So that's going to be the theme, I feel, for the podcast with all of the people we've got coming up. I want to talk a little bit about the economic case of backing women. This is something we talk about all the time in the Women Are Good Business campaign. So, we're 51% of the population, we're 58% of graduates, we are a growing percentage of global wealth. We make the majority by a country mile of consumer decisions, but we only run 1 in 5 businesses. But the ones we do actually do really well in comparison to both mixed teams and male teams. So, Carol, I'm going to come to you with a bit of combined question. One, which is, do we talk enough about the fact that backing women is an economic necessity and it's good? And secondly, can you just share a little bit about your journey of raising money? Because I know you've done that, and that's quite a journey irrelevant of your gender.
Yeah, that is why I'm 21. I look like I'm nearly 50. It's all the fundraising. Okay. So a little bit about my journey. Again, fundraised when I first came to the UK nearly 30 years ago. It was a tech company. Money was flowing. People didn't want to miss out. So, you would go to these Blue Tuesday, third week of every month and with your batch, and people would turn around and be like, how much do you want? Forget about the business model, forget about the numbers. It was very much a different place back then. Then with my second business, actually, we had 85% profitability. We were generating millions. And the reason I wanted to fundraise was because I needed a board, right? I needed to officialize the growth journey that we were about to embark on as we were building our own technology, and wanted to go into that, 50 million pound turnover space. And then most recently with my latest startup, actually it's fundraising to drive a really big infrastructure solution to really help drive economic growth in the UK by helping small businesses. And that requires a lot of technology to make it affordable for the small businesses, but also to connect all the players in the ecosystem. And we've been going to actually fundraise from angel investors. So have gone everything from institutional to VCT to, VC or bank to now angel investment. It's not easy. It's very different. The story, the numbers, the face you have to be prepared for it. Because if you show up in a different country and you don't know how, to basically communicate into their culture, their manners, and, what makes sense to them, then you've just wasted everybody's time. And, that is why we created Sherloc. We decided that actually don't change any of the players in the ecosystem, but put a bit of a Google Translate in the middle that actually helps the founders speak to the investors assess the opportunities with their own language and all of the ecosystem that supports them to be able to, again, get the little piece they need out of the same picture. And it's been hard because the fundraising landscape has been really driven a lot by a lot of VC investment. There's a lot of academic playbooks and checklists that, that now that VCs have become mainstream and commoditized, they go through that checklist and either you tick the box or you don't. In the angel space, there's a lot of risk adversity, because of what's happened in the past, the down rounds, but also the global economic situation where it's people's own personal hard-earned money. And, some of the time they pull the money at the last minute after they said yes because they need to help their grandkids on the cost of living crisis, or they've just become risk averse, right? So if you're a female-founded startup that is looking for big infrastructure money, you don't fall on either bucket, the VCs or in the angels, and specifically the angel funds that are the 5,000 pound checks. We're raising 5 million pounds right now. We've already raised 2.3 to date, including grant funding. Where do we go? Because you don't hit the exercise, the 1 million ARRs for the VCs, and yet you're too big for the small 5K checks from the angels. So it's very difficult. And when we first started, one of my co-founders, Beth Brown, and I would go and we put ourselves through every pitch event, every accelerator program you can imagine. And we've both exited businesses. We've sold businesses in the past. And you don't just come across, well-intended, but not necessarily successful programs that either you come out not having put together a business model, or you come out, worst case, having come out with a basic business model, but being put in front of the wrong investors, right? And then, people who have not done this before get ripped to shreds with questions they cannot answer because they don't have the education, the tools, the support to be able to then go back and say, actually, why are you asking me these questions if you know that I'm still an idea stage founder and I'm not going to have, 1 million MRR or 10K MRR. So there's a bit of a disjoint. So we experienced a lot of that, and we experienced a lot of ageism as well. That was an eye opener because, when you go and sit in front of certain investors and they're trying to put more women into the pipeline, but the women have never run businesses. They're reading off the same playbook sheet, and they're in their early 20s. And they cannot even use their own intuition to assess whether this is a good deal or a bad deal. And you kind of feel like, okay, am I being discriminated against because of my age, my gender, or is it my business idea? Maybe they don't get it. So it just expands the question side.
Yeah.
I think the system definitely needs a rethink.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've talked about on the task force is the right people at the right time for the right business. And that secret sauce is so hard to find because the ecosystem is so huge, isn't it? And I'm going to come to you around kind of more of a banking perspective, because obviously that's in the investment space and we know that's really challenging, but a large proportion of people who run businesses, irrelevant of their gender, don't ever need that sort of investment. But they're still the absolute lifeblood of the UK, and 1 in 5 is just not enough from a female perspective. So from a banking perspective, kind of what does the gender finance gap actually look like, and kind of what are the barriers, do you think, that are stopping women getting access to capital?
Yeah, well, so I think we know this starts much sooner than people starting a business. It's actually goes back to school and the society, and whether enough women see starting to run their own business a thing that they should do and they're encouraged to do. So I think there's an issue, first of all, about pipeline anyway, and whether women see that as a viable kind of career path. By the time they come to a bank to get banking facilities, I think, and we look at the stats, on the face of it, it looks like there is no gender discrimination, because actually a lot of the funding decisions are made by a computer. So there is no ability for that to be. So when you look at the stats from the Investing in Women Code, women are actually slightly more likely to get approved for a loan than a man. Great. But they're applying for much smaller amounts of money than men are. Now, why is that? Part of that will be because the sector they've gone in. So there's there may be more capital light businesses. It's also a confidence/risk appetite issue, I think. And so women aren't necessarily wanting to go the kind of full blown thing. They just like, well, let me just go to the next level and then I'll apply and I'll take it in stages. And then I think there's also a piece around how do we just encourage them to grow perhaps a bit quicker. And I think men are, and I'm being really generalised and obviously hate doing that, but there is genuinely a thing where I think we need to encourage women to have more faith in themselves and to back themselves and to go bolder. And to do that, the banking response needs to be we provide more support. And I think at the moment, when you look at the gender balance of the people we have working in business banking, generally it's probably about 50-50. But actually, by the time you work your way into the relationship director or relationship manager roles, there's still vast majority of men, particularly at the more senior level. And I think that can have an impact on the kind of the ability of them to encourage the women to do more. And I remember when I'd been in my old role very early on, and I was meeting different founders, and I met one female CEO, and she said, the thing is, she said, your relationship director just doesn't speak to me, he speaks to my deputy CEO, who's a man, just because he's a man. And I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen anymore, but I
think it probably does, sadly. And
so it's something we have to be aware of, and we have to. So therefore, we need to make sure we've got a gender balanced kind of RD workforce, and that we are actually very keen to think about how we might need to be different to show up for different clients. And if that means they may be for some less confident clients, what do we do for them versus the more confident ones? What extra support can we give in terms of accelerator programs or the coaching piece, or like advice and help on where they are in their funding journey?
And I think, and I don't like the word education because it feels a bit patronizing, but I think there's definitely a piece around helping women understand being risk aware versus risk averse. We talk a lot about women being risk averse. I don't think we're risk averse. I think we're really risk aware. We come at it from a completely different place than a lot of men will, because our lived experience is different, and therefore we'll make different decisions, like asking for less money. But actually, we return a higher return on investment. And so what we do with the money is amazing. And so actually, we want to help women understand that journey, that actually if they went for a bit more, and interesting with the data that's coming out in the gender index this year, we will also see that actually as women business, they actually grow in turnover faster than men, but they don't super scale. So actually when they're early on, they're really good at running with a small amount of investment or a small amount of debt and being really successful across sectors. But what we see is, as you say, and maybe that's a risk averseness to kind of going into getting investment or getting the bigger line of debt in order to take the next scale. We still only see a relatively small number of women scale, but when they do it brilliantly, and they're really good at it. So I'm going to keep on this kind of topic, and it's a bit around kind of the system. And we've had the Rose Review, we've got years of data, we've got the Investing in Women Code, the Gender Index, which tells us where we are today, which is it's all not a lot has changed in the last few years, whether that's putting debt out the door, whether it's not getting VC funding or angel funding. We're seeing a little improvement in the number of female angels, but not massively. So what needs to change? We've talked about where the challenges are, not enough money going to women, whether it's debt and they're not asking for it, whether it's VC or angel. What needs to change?
Okay, how much time we got?
As much as you like. Off you go, Karen.
So I don't actually think the system is broken. I just think the system is not in harmony, right? Different players need different things and different inputs and outputs out of it. But at the end of the day, what we really need is money in the hands of the women who are running the businesses. And that goes from, changing the way that the investment allocation process works, changing the way that, people understand the different capital opportunities, everything from debt, but also different types of debt, different types of tools like trade finance, supply chain finance. We work in an environment and in a world that is constantly in flux, and never have those types of products and the insurance products that come alongside been more important, because we are an island. We source pretty much everything that we use and we consume. I also think that we need to just put our foot down and say, okay, there's got to be a standard from the accelerators, the programs that are there to help the founders, the female founders, the diverse teams, to have a minimum level of, requirement to say, you have to teach them to, how to build a business model. You have to get them to understand what the market opportunity is, what competitor analysis is, not just turn it into an education exercise. Here's a 25-page PDF document and off you go to the races, and then we'll throw you in front of an investor. But then you also have to make sure that you're doing matchmaking with the correct investors based on the phase that the companies are at, right? And to me, what kind of underpins all of that is that we're all looking at the numbers, we're all looking at the opportunity, but we just need a slightly different lens to be able to coordinate with the ecosystem. To me, if I take just a few things, the funnel for deals, that founders are coming through is biased. Whether you're using AI at the top or you're putting junior analysts at the top, it is biased based on the playbook that was written, that was popularized by the VCs. In order to change that, wouldn't it be easier if we worked with the investors to say, what is your investment criteria? And then whoever is applying for funding has to lead with their numbers, not their 9-page pitch deck when page 2 is the faces of the founders. then let's see.
We're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
That's something that's big on my agenda to come back to. We'll come back to that.
Exactly, right? It's all about the numbers. And, then we can say, okay, here's a list of all the companies that actually match your investment criteria, your investment committee standards, your risk approach, et cetera, right? You don't have to change the founders if you're able to work with them to get those numbers in. Yeah. But you have to be honest with them in the fact that they, it's not like what you see on TikTok or on TV. People do not just suddenly build businesses and receive £1 million by showing
it's not Dragon's Den.
For 6 hours. Exactly. There is an investment piece that they need to put in there. It's achievable, but there are standards that need to come through. So the investment allocation piece needs to change. I also think that we need to widen the diversity of the funds that are investing in female-based businesses, because the one thing the stats show is that women build businesses differently.
Yeah.
They make them sustainable. They have an ROE and an ROI that is longer term, but yet they're a lot more profitable, but they have a longer burn rate and burn lead at the very beginning, because they don't just build for themselves, they build for their communities, they build for purpose. And that is what makes a long-term positive investment opportunity, right? But where are the funds that are able to support that kind of investment path? Whether it's funding vaccines that require significant upfront research, whether it's funding, physical infrastructure projects to help the community convert their high street, whether it's, funding, local community spaces to increase the education about financial education.
Yeah.
They may not have an immediate 3-year flip, unicorn status, but that is how the investors are investing right now.
And I think that, and Hannah, I want to come to you on the task force, because I know there's some great work going on the task force to kind of challenge that, the ecosystem where it's today. But I think what you've touched on is a really important thing, which is, and again, it goes back to my FOMO, which is actually, if the traditional VCs are not willing to change, what we need to do is make sure other people are funding them and making lots of money. And if you get that right, then the old school ecosystem will go, oh, hang on a minute. Oh, you're actually doing really well, and backing women is really good for business and good for the economy. So Hannah, on that, let's come to the task force, because I know there's been a phenomenal amount of work, and it takes a long time to get this stuff up and running and get the money out the door. And I know we've got a nice big headline number, but talk to us about the money that is being pulled together to put in the hands of women VCs and LPs, and also in the hands of female founders.
Yeah, so I would just say, I think the system is broken in the capital allocation, particularly through the equity space. And that's why I think when we did the task force, building on the great work of the Rose Review, but sort of then saying really laser focused, how do we get capital allocation fixed and drive some kind of systemic change to drive more money through to women. So we set about trying to do two things: getting money through to female and mixed founders ultimately, but trying to do it in a way that was more sustainable and was going to change the dynamics of the kind of human on human assessments that are driving any kind of bias through the system. So we need to get it through gender balanced investment committees. So the purpose is to try and get institutions and other kind of participants in the ecosystem, the funding ecosystem, to say, we make a commitment that we will ensure that this amount of money goes via gender balanced IC through to female and mixed teams. And that's where £635 million of commitment to date has been committed, and 17 million has been deployed so far. And so if you look at it, it's two things. One, some of that money is just funding the funders. So that's, and I say just, that's the bit that says, how do we get more female fund managers funded and live and going, so they can then start to deploy their funds in a way that is more gender balanced? Because
we know, even at early stage in fund management, there just aren't as many women, and therefore you're not going to get them running and making big decisions. So you need to start here by also doing... And
I think then, and actually there's a whole sort of evolution that we're going to have to go through, and it's a bit like banking actually back in the day, where you didn't have senior women, and it's taken a concerted effort to get women into senior positions, so that we've now got people like Debbie Crosby, who's CEO of Nationwide. Quick plug. But you need to have a consistent thing, and Women in Finance has done a big job to try and drive that, to make sure we take it seriously. I feel like the entire universe for venture capital is almost like 10, 15 years behind maybe, and who am I to say? I know I'm an outsider, but when I look in, 15% of the investment committees are women, and there's a whole load of VCs that have not a single female general partner in there. And so we have to fix funding the funders. So either that's because we make sure that the funds, that the money that's going in, they're insisting on having women, or at least 30% of women in the investment committee there, so they get investment experience. Then at some point they could go off and run their own funds. So we're trying to drive the pipeline of women that have IC experience, and then make sure they're funding female fund managers. They can then so we've got a fund the funders route, and then others have got their own vehicles already up and running, and again they have to make sure they've got a gender balanced IC, and then they're funding female and mixed teams. And that's the most critical thing, is that we're trying to drive systemic change. And the reason why your point around kind of the FOMO bit of it is, so we did a load of work to get the first female fund manager up and running in the UK with a mandate to back female and mixed teams. So that is almost down to the first close. That's important, because if you then have a kind of flagship fund, if you like, that demonstrates the power of diversity in terms of commercial return, and it is a commercial argument, is we're not going and saying, oh, we've got these women over here, would you mind backing them, please? Because that's not going to work. What we're saying is, we know that female and mixed teams generally perform, it's 35% higher returns from the Kaufman thing. There's a load of studies that have consistently proved that. Now, is that because they're capital starved? Probably. So the ones that have got through will have better returns. But they're not. The point is, there is a missing slice of return that the entire industry is overlooking, though, because of the bias that's built into this system.
And that's just not good for the economy, which is the thing that always gets me really riled. And anyone who knows me, I get really this is, it makes no sense. Like, we want to grow the economy. We are stagnating in growth as an economy, both in the UK and globally. Like, it makes no sense not to back half the population who've actually proved they're really good at it. And so it just doesn't pass the common sense test. When an economy needs to grow, that when women, we know, recruit diversely, they take longer, but they build really financially sustainable businesses, for the industry not to pivot a little bit in order to get those economic gains that are just sat there waiting for them.
And I remember when we first started this journey sort of 2 years ago, the most common refrain back was, well, there just aren't that many good women. So there weren't enough female fund managers, they're not enough female business that need backing. And I was like, that is just not true. And you know, you can, we know. There are loads out there, and every single event you go to, you hear these terrible stories of how people have been treated and how they've faced this bias. And there was a complete reluctance to acknowledge that was even the case. Now, I do think in the last 2 years, that now I don't hear that, actually, and I know we've run events, and you've seen, and we had an event at the London Stock Exchange, was like 80 female general partners turned up, and you're like, this is amazing. All of these women need funding, and it's taken time to, I think, demonstrate it's not lack of demand for the money, it's lack of supply.
And I think back to the ecosystem piece, and this I know the task force is working on as well. It's also turning up where they are. Like, I think part of the reason why the industry doesn't see them is because they operate in different spaces. We have a slightly different tribe. And so actually the industry needs to turn up where the female founders are and then guide them through that process, because it will be the first time they've done it, and they will then get the returns, which to me is common sense. But it does mean everybody's got to behave a little bit differently and think from a slightly different angle.
But that's why I think the commitments are so important, because if you make and it's actually, we were talking at one of the task force boards recently, they said, oh, what is it that made some of the funds commit versus others? And they said, well, actually, it's a senior sponsor. So the reality is, despite the commercial argument you can make, we still need a senior sponsor to say this is the right thing to do. Shouldn't need to, because they should just recognise the committee. But with a senior sponsor in place,
it could be really obvious.
Well, but then that's the thing that then drives people to then make a commitment and then search out, to your point, the opportunities. Without that kind of stated intent, there's no push factor to make them they're quite happy pattern repeating the capital allocation they've done. They're looking at investment. I recognise this sort of thing before. It's something I've done before. It's worked, served me well. I'll follow that again. And then they're not getting the new opportunities that come in, because why should they risk it? It is about risk reward. And they go, well, I don't know this person, it looks different than you. We're like, why would I risk it?
And that's why And that's why we started the Women Are Good Business campaign, because we want to talk about the economics. We want to track those investments and show across the board in the UK what that success looks like, and prove that if you put more money out the door to women in whatever form, that 35% better return isn't just on a small number of women who've managed to survive and make it through. It's actually a broader piece, but also elevating the voices. So, you know, on the pod, we will be interviewing female founders, and we will interview founders who have smashed it, who are really struggling, are trying to raise, because that journey is a really important one. And we want women to be seen so that those VCs see where they are and they're like, oh my God, what she runs is amazing. Every time I've stood up or listened to women pitching their businesses in front of funds who are the right funds for the right time, they never fail to walk away with money, because they're like, wow, I've never heard of it. This is amazing. And I'm like, great. Okay, let's do more of that. And that's what we're trying to achieve in our own little way. So for everyone listening, find us some female founders that you want me to interview, send them to us and we will interview them. We'll elevate and amplify their voices so you can hear their stories. And we're also going to get more experts in to come and ask really difficult questions. So also come and ask us all the questions you want to hear, tell us the experts you want to hear from, and we will get them on the pod. And I've got one more question. I'm conscious we're running out of time. And this is about kind of what you both would say to women who are listening, whether they're thinking about starting a business, whether they're an LP or a GP. An LP and GP, we're going to do a little episode on what all of the acronyms are at some point, but limited partner, general partner, all in the investment space for those who don't know it, because we're all, well, one of us is still in banking, two of us used to be, so we love an acronym. So just to leave us with the final thing is, like, if you could talk to a woman, whether she wants to start a business, she's got a good idea, or she's really struggling at the moment to get funded, or, you know, she's in the banking space or in the VC space, what would you want her to hear? What would you like to leave her with?
Just close your eyes and do it. What's the worst that can happen, right? And I think that's the thing. Like, I use this quote all the time because it just speaks to my heart, is the only thing that holds you back from achieving your utmost potential is your own fear, right? It is around looking around you, seeing that there are lots of people out there that are doing it. It's not an easy journey. But you know, again, growing up isn't. You fall down, you skin your knees, you dust them off, and you get back up, right? Just go for it, right? It doesn't have to be like an immediate flip. The world today enables us to do it off the side of our desks. Start it off as a hobby and then turn it into something else. Again, there are so many support structures, so many communities that are, you know, close by, so many, key educational components online that you can access to actually enable you to start shaping up your journey. But don't be afraid. Just, again, you know, if it doesn't work out, you just go back to doing what you were doing, or better yet, try again.
Yeah.
Take the lesson. What do you need to step back and listen to that, you know, you could have done slightly differently? Speak to your tribe, ask, because sometimes it's not glaringly obvious when you're in the middle of it. And then just jump.
I don't know how I'm supposed to.
Well, go on, Hannah, give it a go. Give it a go.
What would I say? I would say to kind of be brave. I think there's an element of courage that will obviously be, and who might say, I get a salary, so I'm like happy. But if I were to be the person that had to go and take that, it's an enormous leap. So I think be brave, be bold, and like make sure you're asking for enough, and make sure you're taking advice from people. And I think the only thing, and it's not a gendered thing at all, but sometimes I meet some founders who are too wedded to their thing, to their idea, and it kind of gets in the way of them kind of really achieving success, because they need to recognize that there's a commercial reality to what they're doing, and they might need to pivot. So I would just say I'm sure it's really hard, because you've put your life, sweat and blood and tears into this idea, but at some point you've got to go, is like, to your point, what are the numbers showing, and what do I need to do differently to make this actually work, or just start again and do something different.
And I think I'm gonna paraphrase what both of you guys have said, and we're gonna use a bit of Nike. So we've got just do it and be brave and find your tribe. And I think they're both such important messages, and I think they apply as you said, Hannah, to everybody at every point in life, irrelevant if you're starting a business or not. And just a massive thank you to both of you for coming and spending some time with us today. Thank you to Nationwide, because this is their lovely studio that they have lent us for the day to interview you both. And to all of those who are listening, do follow us and keep in touch. Do challenge us and tell us what you want to hear. You have found your tribe if you're a female founder or funder. So do come back and listen to us next week as well. And on that note, women are good business. And thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of Women Are Good Business, podcast. And thank you for listening. Now I need your help. We want to make the podcast huge. We want more people to hear about the stories of female founders. We want to get the best experts in the world so we can grill them with your questions. And we can only do that if people know where to find us. So please help us make the podcast go viral. Like, follow, subscribe, leave us a review, drop us into a WhatsApp group. Whatever is the best way to share, please do share and come with us on the journey as we talk to lots of female founders and we show the world that women really are good business.